Welcome to Talk World Radio, a half-hour discussion of politics as if the people mattered. I'm David Swanson. This week on Talk World Radio, we are talking about the Earth's Greatest Enemy and the new film by that name, The Earth's Greatest Enemy, with its producer, director, Abby Martin, who is a wonderful writer and filmmaker and producer and activist and host and co-producer of the Empire Files. Abby Martin, welcome to Talk World Radio.
Thank you so much for having me, David. It's been a long time coming. I'm so excited to be here and to be talking about this.
I've been waiting to see this film for, I can't recall how long, and it was wonderful just recently to see it, and it's visually stunning, and it's got footage of you asking questions of powerful shills for the fossil fuel industry. We can't reproduce it at all here, but we can talk about the subject. And people should know the website is earthsgreatestenemy.com. What is the Earth's greatest enemy, and how did you determine that?
Yeah, this has been something that Mike and I have been thinking about for quite a long time as we understood kind of the depths of the climate crisis. I think in the wake of the COVID and having our first child and getting confronted with the collision of just anti-war politics and activism with climate anxiety. And so reading Dar Jamal's book, The End of Ice, and just kind of facing down where we're headed with US imperialism and the inability to deal with global crises. When you look at the pandemic and the way that the system reacted to that, and of course, we're facing cataclysmic environmental changes on the horizon, David, and it's just full-blown careening off a cliff, digging our own graves with no end in sight. And so just to take that structure of not only is the US military the enforcer and protector of global capitalism, which is really, the force driving all of this, but just the maintenance of empire. I mean, when we went into this subject thinking it's just about emissions, it's just about the fact that the US military is the largest consumer of fossil fuels. But then once you just start unearthing these subjects, it becomes so much bigger. It's about the water pollution, contamination, it's about the dumping, it's about nuclear waste, it's about destruction of habitats, and it just goes on and on and on, the holocaust of sea creatures in the ocean. And so we decided to make a film that was a one-stop shop, David, that really did catalyze all of these issues together to confront what we think is the world's greatest enemy, which is US imperialism and the machinery that enforces empire.
Indeed, and you make a good case in this film, and it was terrific to start with Dar Jamal. There's so many great people in this film, but someone who looked at war and looked at environmental destruction. I think the first section of the film is very powerful and goes after climate in particular, the US military in particular as a destroyer of the Earth's climate, and how this is left out of climate calculations, but also how much of the climate destruction by the US military we don't even know, isn't even measured. So it may be even worse than the world's greatest enemy, right?
I mean, it's so crazy, David, especially when we were researching this film and seeing that, the 2% GDP and how NATO was driving its members to buy US machinery in the wake of this climate crisis. It's just collective madness and insanity. And then to see it catapulted into the Trump admin 2.0, where it's now 5% of GDP. I mean, it's so unquantifiable. You're just looking at the NATO. And of course, like you just said, I mean, the application of the use of this machinery, which is war, it's completely unquantifiable. We're looking at the destruction of Gaza today. I can't even imagine. I mean, this is going to impact everyone on Earth. The wanton destruction, the desecration of all the green space. It's just unbelievable. So the movie, as we were doing it, it just became worse and worse as we're looking at what we're facing down. But yeah, I mean, going to these climate conferences and chasing down these politicians who are these leading climate activists, Jay Inslee, who ran a presidential campaign on the climate. And he's there just excusing the fact that military is not included. Military is the largest consumer of fossil fuel. What are we talking about here? And you've been shouting at the rooftops about this issue for years, David. So I just felt like it was about time that someone synthesized all of this in a documentary form, because all I've seen so far is academic studies. And, I know we had Netta Crawford's book, but I just thought it was really important to just present the facts and have people use it as a tool for the movement. So we can broaden our net with the anti-war struggle, because so many people care about the environment and they have no idea about these things.
And I and others who have been paying attention to this for years are going to learn things from this film. But what I would really like would be the power of this film to reach all those millions of clueless people who know nothing. And in part to see the responses to your questions of people like Inslee or Nancy Pelosi at you went to one of these cop scam corporate trade shows that pretends to be addressing the climate, the one in Glasgow, Scotland, and you question these people and they had no answer whatsoever and really didn't seem to even pretend to care.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. Isn't it amazing? I mean, first of all, they never get confronted with these things because everyone, these appendages of the corporate media, when you go on RIMPAC or when you go to these conferences, everyone is just there for access. They're all friends. And then, when we're talking about something, especially these military conferences, it's literally assets of like the military industrial complex, Defense One, Air Force One. They just go and talk about how cool this stuff is. And so when these generals are confronted with real questions, they're just completely flabbergasted. And the same with these politicians. I mean, it's such a basic, simple question, David. It's the elephant in the room. And they were acting like it was the end of the world. How could you possibly be addressing this? Oh, how could you possibly question our military? It's sacrosanct. It's unquestionable. It's like, I mean, it's so cartoonish, actually, when you zoom out and just look at what we're dealing with here.
And they very predictably either run away in fear and horror, or they answer you with the stupid claims that the military is the solution to the climate crisis, or that the military is greening itself. And I think the film addresses this very well. And I love when you have this, you show this vehicle that gets to like 0.75 miles per gallon, and they're going to green it to the point where it gets 0.9 miles per gallon. Like, we're saved, right?
It's the Elizabeth Warren model. Let's green a global military empire. I mean, having a global military empire is totally incompatible with a habitable planet. And that's one thing that, as we unearth the climate question here and the complete immunity and impunity from the US military, we realized how widespread this toxic contamination and dumping and, just maintaining the arsenal of military equipment. We're not even talking about the application of it, just maintaining an air force that's 5 times bigger than the next, or that's bigger than the next 5 air forces combined. I mean, what does that do? You're cleaning all of this equipment and you're just dumping it into the ground. And that's forever chemicals, that's, volatile organic compounds that are just poisonous, deadly to human beings. And we don't even know the scope and scale of this because this is the next generation's health crisis, David. And it's just, it's unbelievable.
And it's so absurd for them to green their vehicles and so forth when their enterprise is destroying cities and villages and creating everlasting environmental catastrophes. This is their what they do with their tools and their vehicles. It seems absurd to me. And they're so green and progressive that they told you that they would talk to you if you let them have editorial control over your film. Very, really, really helpful there.
Yeah, exactly. People know, I think, in this world, David, how much the Pentagon influences the narrative. There's been a lot of work. Tom Secker has done a lot of work on this. But it was really amazing to confront this firsthand, to be chasing down Pentagon officials for months and months. In DC, it's way easier to get, like it is so crazy the stonewalling that you get. And you would think that they would want to put their friendly face on it, but no, they demanded that they would get the script in advance and that they basically be able to see the whole treatment to make sure the military is fairly presented. And it was just unreal to go through that whole back and forth with them and realize, oh no, this is not only are we not going to be able to do this and not have an actual official response, but this is kind of painting the whole backdrop of everything that we see including documentary films. Whenever you see military officials being interviewed or giving, tours or whatever, they are basically approving the entire treatment of what you're seeing. And I think that's really sinister in a way that I never even really thought before.
And the film made me think a little differently as well about the bases, because it's not just that the US military is the single biggest polluter and that it's a biggest creator of environmental disaster sites and so forth. But the bases aren't just about power and dominance, they're also about extractivism, about extracting these horrible substances and shipping them and selling them around the world, which wouldn't be happening in the same way without all of these bases. And this is one way, I think, to look at where the several hundred bases are placed around the globe is around where the fossil fuels are, right?
Yeah, that was another, it's kind of these light bulb moments that seem so obvious, but it's so fascinating to look back at the early American history. We took out a big part of the film that was really detailing a lot of the early history because we felt like it was, we didn't want to make a 3-hour film for very obvious reasons. But at a certain point, you realize that the first extraterritorial bases were to protect the fur and mining industry. I mean, the early colonial settlers here almost drove beavers out of extinction or into extinction because they were just supplying fur hats for Europeans. And then, as you mentioned, I mean, it turned into coal. The first overseas bases were to maintain that coal, and then, of course, coal turns to oil. So it has always been a maintenance of fossil fuel infrastructure around the world, and that's become very apparent. I mean, cartoonishly, we look at like the U.S. occupation of Syria. I think Trump, of course, mask off, just stating things as they are, that we're there to take the oil, but it's just so insane. I mean, dystopian mixed with idiocracy, seeing these tanks barreling down at the American flag and the oil rigs, extracting the oil. And it's just like, well, at least the pretense is all dropped. I mean, this is exactly what it is.
Yeah. This is the one good thing you can say about Donald Trump is he doesn't disguise it. The film is called Earth's Greatest Enemy, and we're talking with its creator Abby Martin. There's so many. I mean, the film could have been hundreds of hours, I think, but you got some wonderful examples in there showing, for example, what the U.S. Navy does with its trash and what the U.S. Army does with its ammunition. Can you talk about these scenes?
Yeah, and one really good thing about the movie too, David, like you said, it could have been hundreds of hours, and we could have done that. I mean, we could have made a docu-series. We could have, a lot of people were saying this is like 20 different stories. Why are you trying to piece this together? But we wanted it, just like Gaza Fights for Freedom, we wanted it to be a tool that you can have a one-stop shop and learn a little bit of all of these issues. But of course, it's never been done before. There's been documentaries about the sonar, there's been documentaries about Camp Lejeune, but no one's ever done this. And I think it's really crucial and very important at this moment in time as we are facing a war on reality itself. And a really important component of the film is my husband, Mike Preisner, who is a veteran. He's an anti-war veteran of the Iraq War. He was shipped off to Iraq at 17 years old, joined the army 2 months before 9/11. It's a tragic story. And so he's been an ardent vocal opponent of war and imperialism ever since. And so he kind of guides us through talking to veterans. We highlight a lot of frontline communities that are victims of military pollution that are veterans. And that's a really important story here, is because this crosses all political and party lines. This is impacting every single person on the planet. This military pollution is impacting us all. And so we really hope to not only reach environmentalists, but veterans as well, David. But to your point about what the military does with their trash, that was a really crazy thing that happened is we got a lot of whistleblowers from the Navy in particular to talk about how this is a standard operating procedure, that everyone dumps their trash overboard when they are at sea. We got testimonies from people spanning decades, and it's just horrifying. Little things like that just stick with you. Like one of the guys we talked to, he just said, I feel sick to my stomach thinking of how much we just desecrated the ocean when I was out there. And it's just horrifying. Just the simple disrespect for nature, not understanding that we're a part of nature. And that's really what this comes down to. And we have to really wake up, David, because the planet is careening off a cliff.
And similarly, so when some unit in the army in the film is in a position in a war and then is going to leave, they want to use up all their ammunition, so they get more, and so they just blow it up, which is, of course, hugely damaging to anyone nearby, anyone who lives in the area, anyone who will live in the area in the future, and also to themselves.
It's just like the self-eating cycle. I mean, exactly what the guy says in the movie. I mean, he talks about the $1 million minute, how they, if they have any ammunition left over at the end of the year, they'll blow it up because they won't get more if they have it left over. And that just speaks to the sheer insanity of the military-industrial complex and the fact that the budget continues to raise, even though we leave places like Afghanistan. It is a never-ending, self-fulfilling prophecy. I mean, the fact that Trump, the Department of War, the $1 trillion budget this year, it is just going, it's ramping up, ratcheting up more and more in the backdrop of genocide. And again, it's like we know where this is all going. Do they not have grandchildren? Do they think that they're just going to rely on their seed vaults in their silos? It's just like the collective madness and detachment from reality is very startling, especially as you just dig more and more into the scope and scale of all this.
I have to confess, we just had a 9/11 anniversary flag waving bonanza, and I have to confess, on the original 9/11, I was there in DC, and I thought, well, at least people will now understand that war is pointless and that nuclear weapons don't protect them, and we'll move in a good direction. Absolute idiot, right? And but similarly, I still can't wrap my mind around this vicious cycle that's in your film, where the ice in the Arctic has been melting. So rather than ceasing to burn the fossil fuels that's causing the whole damn Arctic to melt, they seize this opportunity. The US military and other militaries and profiteers seize the opportunity to go into the Arctic to get new access to more fossil fuels with which to further cause whatever's left of the ice to melt faster, right? How do you think, how does anyone make sense of this while denying that the whole thing is happening, I guess?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're at a point where they're not even admitting that climate change is real. So now we have gotten into such a bizarre state. 20 years ago when Inconvenient Truth came out, I was just like, okay, like, finally we're at this consensus. And it does seem like we've gone backward to the point where we're now just debating our reality together. Do we share the same reality? Are we in consensus about what this is? And
Yeah.
sadly, it's becoming harder and harder, especially with genocide denial. So it's, we're in we're in a very important moment right now. It's a very, very critical juncture. And I think that the consciousness is exploding and films like this can serve as such an important catalyst, David. And that's why we need to generate our movements, join these struggles together, because as the film outlines, this does not stop and start with this. This incorporates ICE. This is about the militarized police. This is about environmental activists. This is about cop cities. This is about police brutality. This is about everything. This is about the national security state. And so it's really, they've atomized our struggles and they've co-opted them and sold them back to us for decades. And so we need to really, the moment is really incredible right now, I have to say. And I'm sure you would agree as someone who's been in this movement for so long.
It's a moment for independent films and independent media because the corporate media is collapsing. And there's so many wonderful people and organizations and stories in this film. Our friend and World Beyond War board member Pat Elder has some great parts in here. But I think it's just critical that people grasp what the U.S. military and militaries in general do to the environment, on top of which they're sucking away all the money that could be used to protect the environment, on top of which they're creating enemies of these governments that need to be cooperating if we were going to save ourselves. On top of which they create the risk of nuclear apocalypse, which is, just speeded up destruction of everything, right? So, I mean, is there even a close second place for the Earth's greatest enemy?
Nowhere near, nowhere near, And when people bring up animal agriculture or China and stuff, it's like we're talking about the maintenance of a global system that overrides all of these things, the industries, the specific things. I mean, and if you just look at the institutional pollution, like when you hear that statistic, and I think people need to wrap their minds around this, you hear the statistic that the Pentagon is the largest institutional polluter, that just means the consumption of oil daily. That's it. Like, so literally just that specific calculation, when you take in again, as the film outlines, the life cycle emissions, the supply chain, war, and then of course everything else that we're outlining, the contamination of just the equipment, and toxification of our lands and destruction of our lands. It's so incomprehensible. That's why Barry Sanders, who initially wrote the Green Zone, um, wrote that if you shut down every factory, we would still be heading toward essentially like environmental collapse because of the US military alone. And it's a really dramatic quote, but I think it's accurate, especially after just, you know, quantifying all this. It's like you really can't. You
Yeah.
really
Another great voice in the movie, Barry Sanders. And there's another statistic in the movie. You maybe can do it correctly, but how far you would have to drive your car to equal one flight of a military bomber.
What's amazing about this, the Boeing, the Pentagon, or what is it called? The Pegasus, sorry, the Boeing Pegasus. These are
Yeah.
like floating gas stations. Like it's so ridiculous. You look at it, you're like, why do we have these? I mean, it's so outrageous. You'd have to drive your car for like 60 years straight. I mean, to just have one flight mission of these things. And then they refuel these other planes. And it's just like, and most of this is just pointless missions, just flying around for pointless mission, just readiness, military readiness. And then, of course, the war games out on the ocean. I mean, all the destruction there, that's just, they don't, when you have a military that's protecting and subsidizing a genocide, a wholesale genocide that we're watching in 4K, I don't know if people are going to care about the fish in the ocean, but I hope that they do, David, because it's everything. It's everything.
I hope so. There's also another wonderful section in the film about Okinawa and the destruction and the resistance and the protests that are prevalent. The world is not as accepting as many U.S. residents might think of U.S. empire, is it?
No, and that's one of the most beautiful things about the research and doing this on the ground because the unsung heroes are the people who are not lauded on the front pages of magazines or on, in MSNBC. They're doing this work, the civil disobedience day in and day out. The people in Okinawa who have been fighting for decades, putting their bodies literally in front of these trucks just to slow down the construction of this base in this beautiful, pristine Hanoko Bay that's
Yeah.
full of endangered species and rare coral and all of this. And so I actually woke up to U.S. imperialism reading Chalmers Johnson book Blowback back when I was in college, and the chapter on Okinawa changed my life, and I knew I had to go back there. And so to go there 20 years after becoming an anti-imperialist because of that story, and to meet the people and to join the protests, to be there on the ground and to be pregnant with my child. It was just such an emotional thing. And it was hard to put myself and like my family in the movie, David. But we have to show people that this is everyone. This impacts everyone. And it's all of our stories. And it's all of our futures.
And people hear protests, they think some tiny segment of a population is doing protests. In Okinawa, it's darn near everybody and the government, right? The government of Okinawa is against what's happening in Okinawa too, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly. It shows the power of the US. I mean, Japan is just one of the subservient imperial partners of the US empire. And
Yeah.
so, that it's unreal. And it's fascinating that it's just an extension of US power. And it's really revealed there that the governor of Okinawa can't really do anything about it.
Today, as we're recording this, Abby Martin, I was watching Democracy Now! And saw the head of Amnesty International telling us that Lockheed and Boeing are the big problems and we need to get away from this war economy and war culture. And I'm thinking, this is the same organization that for decades wouldn't even notice that wars are launched, would just talk about particular atrocities and thank NATO for occupying Afghanistan and so forth. So I see that as, a little progress. So I'm curious what you're seeing in terms of organizations embracing your film. I'm going to go out on a limb and say peace groups are more eager to promote it than environmental groups. Am I right?
Well, I mean, of course, I could have gone after environmental groups in the film and I could have gone and confronted a bunch of groups. Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? I want it to be a bridge and I want it to be an extension of alliances. And I think we can build our solidarity together. And that's really crucial for me. So that is really good news. And I know that Greenpeace has done a lot of great work on Okinawa and other things. But of course, we know that to a large extent, a lot of these organizations are just folded in with kind of that whole NGOization. It's like you go along to get along, and it's hard to confront what's right in front of your face. And so I think that as we are facing the reality with open eyes and taking off our rose-colored glasses, I hope these organizations will see that we need to join together. We need to band together and face the elephant in the room, David, which is war, militarism, and imperialism, if we want to truly save the planet.
I couldn't agree more. And I think this film could be a great tool to do it. We've got just a couple minutes left. Abby Martin's film is Earth's Greatest Enemy. The website is earthsgreatestenemy.com. How can people see it? What can people do to follow your work and to promote this film?
So people can go to earthsgreatestenemy.com. They can go join one of the many tours that we're putting on nationally. My husband Mike and I are going to try to do just this, build coalitions with the environmental movements, gets all of the community together to watch this film and agitate and motivate each other. How can we build and bridge our movements? So this is the big thing that we're doing right now. I encourage everyone who's listening to get involved. If you want us to bring it to your city, we would love to find an independent theater or a university theater to screen it there. I think the first stage, David, is we're going to go in person and try to really build up these in-person events. And then the next stage will be people screening it on their own. And the third stage will be releasing it online. Because as we know, this is too hot. Just like Barry Sanders said, it's too hot, which is crazy to think that at this day and age that this subject would be quote unquote too hot for the mainstream. Again, we've been gaslit to think, oh, liberal media is the hegemony. No, right-wing discourse has co-opted our reality. And so this whole Charlie Kirk horrific situation has shown us that we're fighting for our lives in the public space. So things like this is really going to take a huge grassroots mobilization to get seen. It's not going to get on Netflix. It's not going to get seen in the mainstream. So we have to put ourselves out there and get it seen and put it in front of people, because I really think it can mobilize and change people's minds, David, and that's what we need right now.
Well, local events is a great way to do it, and local environmental groups are all for peace. So I think that's a great way to start. And people who want to do a local event can contact you through the website.
Exactly. Yep. Yep. The empirefiles@gmail.com. And there's also a contact form on the website. So check it out. David, thank you so much. Your work has been so inspiring. And I know that just years ago you were like, let's go, like, let's do this movie. You've been right there from the beginning, kicking our butts and giving us a bunch of, gassing us up and saying you can do it. And so I'm so happy it's finally done. I'm really happy you liked it, and hopefully we can get it out there, build the
I
movement.
am I am very happy too. The website again is earthsgreatestenemy.com. Abby Martin, thank you for everything you've been doing for years and for coming on Talk World Radio.
All right, we'll see you later. Thank you so much, David.
This is Talk World Radio. I'm David Swanson. Take action at rootsaction.org. Help end war at worldbeyondwar.org. Read or listen to today's Peace Almanac entry at peacealmanac.org. All past shows can be heard at talkworldradio.org. Talk World Radio is produced in Charlottesville, Virginia, and syndicated by Pacifica Network. There is no way to peace. Peace is the way.